Undertale is a 2015 indie RPG created by Toby Fox. To say that it has received critical acclaim is an understatement. With a 10 out of 10 rating on Steam, Undertale is one of the most beloved video games ever developed. The iconic cast of characters, exhilarating music, and encapsulating lore make the world of the Underground feel real to an entire generation of gamers. In the game, you control the character of Frisk, a human who has fallen from the surface world into the Underground, where monsters, all shapes and sizes, have been imprisoned for many years. We begin in the ruins under the caring watch of the former queen of the Underground, Toriel, who wishes to give us a home with her rather than have us return to the surface world, since this would require us to pass through the monster's society. This, of course, piques our curiosity as gamers, and we eventually face Toriel herself and prove to her that we are worthy to face the Underground. Throughout our journey, we see the diverse locations of the Monster Society, the winter wonderland of Snowdin, the dingy and dim waterfall, the aptly named Hotland, and the futuristic core which powers the monster's civilization. The monsters we encounter are equally varied: skeletons, fish monsters, spiders, and, of course, However, one aspect of the Monster Society that is constant throughout the game and nags at us as an injustice is the incredibly hierarchical and ultra-capitalist nature of the Underground. We see many shops and enterprises throughout the course of the game, ranging from the diner Grillby's, a small business often visited by our good friend Sans, to the Metaton Resort, a hotel with the facade of glamour. Ultimately though, it is McDonaldized in how it is staffed by minimum wage workers just struggling to get by. We see the recurring spider bake sale, which bankrupts us through their extortionate prices, and who can forget the Temmie Village. While humorous, the Temmie Village is perhaps one of the most damning products of the Underground's economic system. As well as the unusual items of food, we are able to pay for Temmie's college tuition for a sizable sum of 1,000 gold. If this is how she needs to raise money to access education, how else could the Monsters Society be divided between rich and poor? This observation leads us to an important question. How is the Monster Society run? What was King Asgore's motivation for creating such an unequal, hyper-capitalist society?
He said, I love you on the plane, I said, I love you too. He said, everything's different.
It's the late 70s. The President of the United States is Jimmy Carter, a Democrat in his first term, hopeful for re-election in 1980. Unfortunate for him, this would prove to be quite an uphill and ultimately unwinnable battle. Inflation was high and employment was low. A revolution in Iran disrupted America's supply of oil, the effect of which was felt throughout American society. With this winter's sudden spate of gasoline shortages now beginning to disappear, can motorists count on a hassle-free spring and summer on the highway? Hardly. By Memorial Day or shortly thereafter, shortages may start appearing all over again. This startling development of foreign affairs would reflect poorly on Carter's administration, which appeared to be nothing but a series of blunders. At first, US officials dismissed the Iranian oil field strike as a temporary phenomenon of no great consequence, but the strike has been dragging on since late October, and for the last month, virtually no crude at all has been pumped out of the ground. Last week, in fact, the US faced the bizarre situation of having to rush an emergency shipment of 200,000 barrels of diesel fuel and gasoline to Iran because local refinery output is insufficient to meet domestic needs. America's strategic position in global affairs appeared to be crumbling. According to a Gallup poll in June of 1979, Carter's approval rating was 28%, a haunting figure for anyone looking for a second term in office. Americans wanted change, and they saw that change in Ronald Wilson Reagan, a former actor turned Republican politician. He had proven to have electoral experience, serving as governor of California in 1966, winning the hearts of 3.7 million voters and a landslide majority of 57.5% of the electorate, defeating the incumbent governor. And, in 1980, he thought he had what it took to do the same to Carter. And he did. As the results of the 1980 presidential election rolled in, it was clear that Reagan won in a landslide, getting 489 out of 538 electoral votes. Often considered to be a realignment of the way Americans view politics and economics, and the first major victory for the modern conservative movement, the 1980 presidential election would lead the way to a radical change in the way America worked. Promoting neoliberal trickle-down economics, which had a disdain for regulation and a love of the free market. The Reagan era was heaven for big businesses. When he first entered office in 1980, the top tax rate was 70%. By the end of his presidency, 28%. 20 million new jobs were created, a figure boasted by organizations such as the Heritage Foundation, which describes itself as a research and educational institution whose mission is to build and promote conservative public policies. But critics point to rising income inequality in the Reagan years. Beginning in 1981, participation in unions fell faster than, well, frisk into the underground, an effect that still hadn't recovered by 2001. Reagan's weakening of unions came from the wealthy's desire to avoid higher taxes, profiting from the cheap labor of working people. This ultimately led to the divide between the rich and poor growing under Ronald Reagan's fiscal policies. While unions may have had their activities disrupted by the Reagan administration, you can make sure your activities are not disrupted by our video's sponsor, VPN. Are you sick of going onto your favorite streaming service only to find that the TV series you want to watch is not available in your country? Well, no problem. With VPN, you can get around big government regulation and sit back and relax to the greatest show ever made, The Office, no matter where you are in the world.
No, God, please, no! No!
With 100 locations to choose from, such as the United States, the UK, France, or even Iran if you feel like getting your oil fields bombed, your data will be protected. And the first 250 people to go to vpn.com/Ronald Reagan will get 20% off their first 3 months. Thanks to VPN for sponsoring this video. At the end of the day, the neoliberal economic policy of Reagan seems familiar, doesn't it? It seems like the 1980s American economic landscape seems awfully familiar to how I described the monster's society in Undertale. Let's investigate this further by examining the role that the different characters play in the world of Undertale. Papyrus is a lovable, goofy skeleton trying to make his way in the underground, and the brother of Sans. He aspires to join the Royal Guard, the military of the underground, and is motivated to catch a human to prove himself worthy to Undine and Asgore. Living in Snowdin, he thus becomes the first major antagonist to face you in the game. Under the Reagan administration, military spending skyrocketed, at the expense of the infrastructure of America and services used by ordinary Americans. Analyzing the fiscal 1982 federal budget, the Congressional Budget Office reported, if the administration's proposals for reducing spending are enacted, programs that now account for about 30% of the federal budget will absorb essentially all of the effects. The major share of the reductions would affect areas such as education, employment, and training, nutrition, health, and social services. There would also be a profound impact on transportation and energy programs. This effect is evident in Papyrus's home, Snowdin. The infrastructure of Snowdin is incredibly poor, having to solve puzzles to travel to it from the ruins, with the consequences of failing the puzzle being to fall several feet. The town's name, a parody of Snowed In, doesn't exactly imply the best level of maintenance either. In contrast, look at the vast wealth of the monster's military. We encounter numerous members of the Royal Guard throughout all areas of the underground. Undine, notably, has a stockpile of weapons that she will use against you throughout a substantial portion of your trek through Waterfall. Alphys, the well-funded royal scientist, was given the funds to develop Metaton by Asgore, a robot designed for killing humans. The ambition of Papyrus the Skeleton is clear. Some Americans join the military to escape suburban America, and earn money for reasons such as college, housing, or even healthcare benefits, a function in American society that the military is able to provide due to policies promoted by presidents such as Ronald Reagan. Analogously, Papyrus wants to escape the limiting confines of his life in Snowdin, and the way to do this for him is to join the Royal Guard. In the end, though, Papyrus is not able to capture you. This is partially due to his incompetence, but also due to his good heart. While the socio-economic system promoted by the Monsters Society encourages Papyrus to be hostile, he ends up befriending Frisk, knowing that the human will be killed, even if it is to forward Asgore's goal to tear down the barrier separating the monsters from the surface and set them free. It is too much for the unparalleled Spaghettior. While Papyrus is at the bottom of the Monster Society and working his way up, there is a lot to be said from examining the characters at the top.
Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
One aspect of global politics I haven't touched on much yet is the Cold War, and how it shaped and was shaped by Ronald Reagan's presidency. The world was divided in two. The capitalist West included the United States and its allies, and the communist East was led by the Soviet Union. Since the end of the Second World War, these two powers had been struggling for influence: military, scientific, economic. The two sides were separated by what was dubbed the Iron Curtain, dividing Europe between its capitalist and communist sides. Notably, the city of Berlin was divided by a wall, splitting the city into east and west. Does this sound familiar? In Undertale, the world is divided between humans and monsters, with a barrier separating the surface and the underground that can only be broken by capturing 7 human souls, the ultimate goal of Asgore. Long ago, 2 races ruled over Earth: humans and monsters. One day, war broke out between the 2 races. After a long battle, the humans were victorious. They sealed the monsters underground with a magic spell. As king, Asgore is an allegory for President Ronald Reagan. Just like how Asgore is determined to open the barrier to the surface, perhaps the most famous moment of Ronald Reagan's presidency was this speech he gave at the Berlin Wall. "We welcome change and openness, for we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign that the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." With a few substitutions, these words could have easily been part of Asgore's dialogue during the climax of Undertale's plot. For these actions, Asgore is generally regarded as a hero among the underground, with Papyrus calling him a big fuzzy pushover. This is reflected in contemporary attitudes towards Reagan in the United States. A 2011 Gallup poll of 1,015 Americans found that when asked the question, "Who do you regard as the greatest US president?" the most popular answer, picked by 19% of all respondents, was Reagan. In second place, 14% said Abraham Lincoln. George Washington was in 5th place with 10%. Other polls also generally confirm this popularity of Reagan. But what does Undertale say about Asgore and, by allegory, Ronald Reagan? Yes, Asgore is a man of great popularity in the underground, but turns out to be a lonely, prejudiced, and stubborn individual. Located in the empty castle at the end of the game, Asgore is left alone. Via Alphys' secret laboratory, we find out about the loss of his son, Azrael, who has been corrupted into a soulless being of pure evil named Flowey, and further, the death of a human that he and Toriel adopted. This event caused him to declare that any human in monster territory must be killed to break the barrier, leading to his wife leaving him. In the universe of Undertale, Asgore is almost a legendary figure to all the other monsters, but, in reality, isolates the people closest to him. Similarly to how Asgore's declaration that all humans should be killed caused the underground to be hostile to the player years later when we fell down from the surface, Reagan used tragedies such as the AIDS epidemic or the war on drugs to weaponize the public against the most vulnerable members of society. To say that Asgore is an allegory of Reagan is somewhat of a simplification though. Personally, I believe Reagan is alluded to more through the composition of Asgore and Metaton, who reflect the two sides of Reagan. Asgore is Reagan the president, whilst Metaton is Reagan the man. While we have argued that Asgore is a metaphor for Reagan's actions and policies, we can also make the case for Metaton as a part of Reagan's personality. Firstly, let's get the obvious part out of the way. Metaton is a reality TV star. Reagan was a TV star before his career in politics. That's quite a surface level comparison, excuse the pun, but we can go a little deeper when we compare the culture that Metaton managed to create in the underground during his stardom. Metaton is adored in the underground as a star and uses the media to cultivate a parasocial relationship with many citizens of the underground. You hear of his MTT brand throughout the underground before even your first encounter with him. When he contemplates quitting his job, many monsters call into the boss fight, genuinely upset. Realizing how attached the audience is to him, Metaton is eventually compelled to continue his acting career. Similarly, Ronald Reagan was regarded as able to employ media as a tool in his election campaigns and public opinion. In contemporary election cycles, we have seen how candidates such as Barack Obama and Donald Trump have used social media to publicize their campaigns, while the 80s analogue of that would have been what Reagan did with the press. Mr. Reagan, of course, is a past master at using the news media to his advantage. His skills at projecting his strong personality and set of convictions have brought him dazzling political success. Moreover, the president has displayed his news media artistry at a time where television has become the dominant means by which the public gets its news. From the beginning of his presidency, Mr. Reagan and his aides understood and exploited what they acknowledged to be the built-in tendency of television to emphasize appearances and impressions more than information. When we talk about the contemporary popularity of Ronald Reagan, as mentioned in the section on Asgore, we can ask to what extent that popularity is due to the Asgore side of Reagan, what he did, or the Metaton side of Reagan, how he looked while he did it. As a final word on Metaton, his hotel resort that we encounter in between Hotland and the core shows another side of Reagan's personality, namely the love of capitalism. I mentioned in the introduction that the resort is almost ran as though it were a McDonald's restaurant, evident in the character of Burger Pants, who staffs the shop. This character's negative attitude to Metaton, his boss, ultimately reflects the socio-economic disenfranchisement that working-class individuals often feel about trickle-down economics. Future? What future? Nothing down here ever changes. I'll probably be trapped at this stupid job forever. The legacy of Reagan's administration is still widely debated among academics, political pundits, and the general public as a whole. The opinion of Undertale, though, is clear. Through its portrayal of a socio-economic system that glorifies violence, discriminates against humans, cultivates income inequality, and empowers the military-industrial complex, the Underground gives a damning reflection on the American political system of the Reagan era. The question that remains is, how will the monster society move on after the events of Undertale? Reagan would be succeeded by his vice president, George Bush, in 1988, for one further term of Republican rule. The Reagan era would eventually end in 1992, where Bush lost his re-election campaign to Democrat Bill Clinton, campaigning on the economy due to Americans' increasing desire for change. Depending on the actions of the player, Undertale offers a myriad of endings, ranging from one truly positive ending to a variety of optimistic, hopeless, and tragic endings, to one truly horrifying ending. It is quite apt that we as players get to choose what the future of the monsters should be. Democracy, an ideal America prides itself on, is left in our hands. Perhaps that is the greatest message of Undertale. The power for change lies in our hands. Hey! Thanks for sticking to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know this one was quite long, but if you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe and do all of the things that the YouTube algorithm wants you to do. Please. Please. If you really liked it, perhaps even consider joining my Patreon, the backers of which have their names scrolling right now. Any contribution is much appreciated. I'd really like to be able to expand my Funko Pop collection. Anyway, that's all I have to say. So until next time, stay safe, be kind, and peace. I'm gonna do a couple more Burger Pants voice lines just because I fucking love Burger Pants. Okay, I love Burger Pants. The fucking little skrunklo, love that bit.